Monday night on the Matt Sager podcast. I'm Matt Sager, and welcome to the show. Caught up on BoJack over the weekend, watched the entirety of BoJack Horseman Season 5 while also completing Ozark Season 2. And let me tell you, if all you have right now is Netflix, I mean, you are missing a lot. There's this Active Measures movie on Hulu, for instance, that's pretty awesome. But Netflix is really just killing it right now. BoJack has never been better, and I've gotten lots of responses to my trivia question that I put out Friday regarding BoJack Horseman Season 3, and specifically a key plot element of that season, a fictional television show that BoJack starred in, not horsing around, but another one called The BoJack Horseman Show. My trivia question was, there's a real show around which that disastrous BoJack Horseman show is based. It aired on Fox, and much like the BoJack Horseman show, it aired in 2007. I've gotten a ton of responses to the trivia question. You know, the prize is free airtime on the Matt Sager podcast, with which you can plug whatever you like, with the strict caveat that it not involve hate, violence, extreme partisanship, you know, anything that sort of dominates all of news and social media. It's got to be nice. Plug your business, propose to your girlfriend or boyfriend, tell someone you love them, free airtime for something positive. And I've gotten a lot of responses, many of them extremely close. It turns out that Fox in 2007 had a ton of shitty shows, but so far I have not received the right response. So if you want to get on that, email me at matt@mattsager.com or call 646-535-4788 or listen to some of the other social media links I'll give out at the end of tonight's show. I did want to talk tonight briefly about my old employer, SiriusXM, and their presence in the news of late. It's not surprisingly for kind of shitty behavior. I want to first say I've got a lot of friends who are there, who are doing really well there, who I love and who I believe probably support a lot of this reporting, probably agree with it. I would never call upon them or ask them to opine, to put their careers in jeopardy. I'm just saying that I'm not attacking them. I am attacking the bureaucracy there, the business minds in charge, and in particular, one key figure who was also the chairman of the board of Live Nation, who, by working for Live Nation while simultaneously running SiriusXM, essentially having a stranglehold over all of music, he's destroying the ability to make a living of the very art form that his business depends on to exist. So it's incredibly cynical, it's incredibly nasty, it's incredibly disgusting. He's cannibalizing music and musicians. He's leading SiriusXM and Live Nation to an inevitable depression and ultimate probably death. But, you know, as long as he makes his money now, gets his golden parachute when the time comes, that's really all that matters. So a letter was published today. It was signed by over 150 artists, including but not limited to Carole King, Paul McCartney, Sir Paul, Don Henley, Katy Perry, Pink, 150 plus. And it's about how SiriusXM is the lone entity. Now, granted, they're also pretty much the only radio in town, which is one of the reasons why I know a bunch of people who are still over there doing air shifts for free. It really sucks. My experience with SiriusXM, it's not really relevant here. I'll say this. Yes, I had what effectively amounted to theft of services. Yes, I was sexually assaulted. I had a lot of unpleasant experiences. I'll also say that the reason I worked at what was then Sirius rather than what was then XM, you know, at first there were two different companies. Sirius was in New York, XM was in Washington, and they were both recruiting talent, including both sending me offers before their services were working and years before they merged. And XM's offer was far superior than Sirius's offer. It was maybe 40 times better of an offer on its face, let alone the stuff that ended up happening to me that was really unfortunate at Sirius, the services that were sort of stolen, the sexual stuff. It's all bad. But I just couldn't see myself moving to DC because A, it wasn't that great an offer. Neither of them had that much money to throw around at the time. Certainly not for people like myself. You know, for a Howard Stern, absolutely. But even that took years. This was years before Howard came to the service. But what really influenced me, what convinced me that XM and probably Sirius were not going to be quite the game changers they promised they would be, was I had this delightful interview followed by a lunch, followed by like a real meeting of the minds with a big programming guy at XM who said, listen, all the crap about radio that you hate, that the listeners hate, the Callout Hooks, which is a radio term for, basically it's shorthand for programming by research and data sets as opposed to passion or love of music, or as opposed to polling real listeners for what they really wanted and what they really hoped to get out of radio. This was all about calling in random strangers, playing them Stairway to Heaven. This is a real thing that happened to me at a radio station I worked at that exemplifies Callout Hooks, research in general, and why radio is so shitty. What they would do is gather as many people in a room as they could that could spare an hour. They'd pay them $25 or so a piece. And it was to get as large a sampling of different types of radio listeners as possible. And then they would play them a song, Stairway to Heaven in particular. This was the one I was witness to, was Stairway. And ask a single question. Do you hear this song on the radio a lot? And everyone would, of course, say, yeah, it's Stairway to Heaven. I hear it every 9 minutes. What are you talking about? Yes, we're very familiar with it. And they'd go, great, because familiarity equaled a desire to hear it more. There was no follow-up question of, do you like hearing it that often? Here's another song. Would you rather hear this occasionally sprinkled in? Research was the biggest waste of time, money, efficiency, and resources I've ever seen in my life, and I've seen some shit. But so this XM programmer, big chief guy at XM, not naming him, but he was about as big as it got at that time, said, listen, all that stuff, we know it's poisoned the well. We're going to reinvent radio starting by scrapping each one of those things. And I returned home to New York City quite convinced that I was going to move to Washington, D.C. and XM satellite radio was going to become my new home. Because I did hate all that crap. But literally, I turned on the TV as I was unpacking. And the first thing I saw was, if you remember those VH1 Behind the Musics, when they ran out of bands that had had awful things happen to them, when they'd gone through Poison, when you had CeCe DeMille going, first we were the House of Whores, but then we became the House of Horrors. You get it? Yeah, we get it. And then you had Leif Garrett. Now, granted, by this time, they were obviously scraping the bottom of the barrel. But for pure schadenfreude, you couldn't get much better than Leif Garrett going, and then I hit the tree, and then my friend, and oh, God, you brought my friend out, and oh, Christ. So they ran out of those. You know, Journeys was not that interesting. We got tired of Steve Perry. He was kind of being a douche, and he lost his voice. They couldn't make a 30-minute segment out of every band that didn't have a perfect run of it. Badfinger, you could make a 9-hour movie about them and I'd watch. That's an epic. But Behind the Music was trying to make an epic event out of every band that had ever existed, and they'd run out of steam, and they were now doing Behind the Music years. Behind the Music, 1978. It was silly, but the one that was airing as I was unpacking from my DC road trip was Behind the Music, either 84 or 85. And I had to do a double take because the guy on screen was the guy I'd just conducted my interview with at XM. It's like, wait, this can't, no, that's his name on the little chyron. What's he saying? And I turned up the volume, and this gentleman was saying, so yes, in 1985, I invented the call-out hook, and I began customer research and started bringing listeners in and polling them to see how often they'd heard one song, and if they'd said they'd heard it a lot, then I'd play it 10 times more. And I thought, wait a minute, this guy who just said he's going to get rid of all this garbage, he's the guy who invented it. The revolution is a fraud. So I may as well just stay in New York because this is not reinventing the wheel, clearly. The guys steering this boat were the same guys who crashed the previous boat of FM and AM radio. It's just simply true. It's not an insult. It's the reality. But things got worse. Things got particularly bad for me as an employee of Sirius, and now things are bad for music in general. So now that music is completely digital, artists are having a very difficult time getting paid for all kinds of reasons. And that includes artists who were around when it was the old Victrola, when it was 78s, 33s, 45s, cassettes, mini discs, CDs. They were around inventing rock and roll and the blues and are now going, SiriusXM has 90 channels dedicated completely to my music, and I'm getting like 70 cents a month. This is a problem. And so many of these artists and people behind their labels and management have gotten together to create something called the Music Modernization Act. And the idea is it's for music recorded before 1972 You keep it from falling out of copyright protection. Copyright law is a whole thing that I'd rather not get into because it's boring as hell, and it'll also really get me pissed off. It's not a good thing. Sonny Bono, right before he died, was a congressman and messed with copyright law in all kinds of ways, the repercussions of which I don't know if he could have imagined them, but at the time it was to make sure Disney would forever make millions of dollars and no one would have the chance to ever have a similar level of success. It's playing out in ways good and bad, mostly in bad ways because it's mostly bad actors in the entertainment industry taking advantage of it. So the Music Modernization Act would take these recordings from before 1972 and keep them out of this pitfall of weird laws and other shenanigans involved with copyright. And everyone is on board. By everyone, I mean the streaming services you're thinking of. Apple Music, Amazon Music, Spotify. You know, none of us are getting our music from Tower Records anymore. That ship has long since sailed. But all of the streaming music services and the electronic sales channels for music, they're all on board. One individual company is holding out. That would be SiriusXM. That's a problem. They are music radio. Yeah, you've got your local radio station, and I wish them the very best. But SiriusXM, to the extent anything other than your computer or iPhone or Android phone is going to be a way in which you receive music, the only other option really that matters is SiriusXM, and they are holding out on it. And it really, really is unfortunate. The letter written to Greg Maffei, Maffei, Scott Greenstein, and Jim Meyer, Liberty Board of Directors, Evan D. Malone, David E. Rapley, Larry E. Romrell, Brian M. Devey, Andrea L. Wong, Robert R. Bennett, M. Ian G. Gilchrist, and John C. Malone is as follows. I'm writing you with grave concern about SiriusXM's opposition to the Music Modernization Act. I'm CCing some of the greatest songwriters and artists in the history of the music business to show our solidarity in support of this legislation in its current form. We're all aware of your company's objections. I'm taking time out of reading the letter back to stress your company's objections because it's only this company that's holding this up. Okay, back to reciting the letter. We are all aware of your company's objections and trepidation, but let me say that this is an opportunity for SiriusXM to take a leadership position. As you are aware, 415 representatives and 76 senators have already co-sponsored the MMA, along with industry consensus. It's SiriusXM versus all of us. We can either fight to the bitter end or celebrate this victory together. Rather than watch bad press and ill will pile up against SiriusXM, why not come out supporting the most consequential music legislation in 109 years? We do not want to fight and boycott your company, but we will have other opponents. Stand with us, be brave, and take credit for being the heroes who helped the MMA become historic law. Momentum is building against SiriusXM, and you still have an opportunity to come out on the right side of history. We look forward to your endorsement, but the fire is burning, and only you can put this out. Now, before I go to this sincerely, fire is burning is a serious statement. They're trying to make a point, but going back to A Tale of Two Cities, going back to The Dark Knight Rises, the use of fire to describe a movement means they're not fucking around, nor should they be. And the letter ends, sincerely yours, Russ Golan and legends CC'd here. The legends begin, as I mentioned, with Sir Paul McCartney. They go on to include Stevie Nicks, Don Henley, Mick Fleetwood, Steve Tyler, Joe Perry, Carole King, Carly Simon. It goes on. Jefferson Airplane, the entire band. The Pixies, the entire band. The Eurythmics, Garbage, Gloria Estefan, The Pretenders, Casey and the Sunshine Band. This is not a joke. This is not a controversial issue other than the people at SiriusXM. And specifically, when I think of SiriusXM, I know that that letter was addressed to several members of the board at SiriusXM, several chief officers. The one I'm concerned with is Greg Maffei. He is both the chairman of the board of SiriusXM and the chairman of the board at Live Nation. Live Nation, as you may know, is the single largest producer of live concerts. They were built on a foundation of supporting and promoting artists, and they are overseen by the same guy overseeing SiriusXM, the same guy who is fighting tooth and nail, fighting history, fighting every other music distribution platform on the planet to keep the money out of the hands of the artists upon which his businesses were built and upon which they depend. And if he fights long enough, well, enough of these artists will eventually die off, and they can start bringing in YouTube people and find another way to circumvent paying the creators. It's a really old, really shitty, and really wrong attitude of let's get as much content as we can from the most talented people in the world and try to find a way to pay them nothing. It is essentially the entertainment industry's business model. Milk talent, get them to do as much as possible, find a way to pay them nothing if possible. Nothing is ideal, but if you've got to, pay them the absolute minimum. And if there's laws that require you to pay them more, circumvent those laws. And if you can't circumvent them, then rather than pay the artist, pay a lobbyist to find a way to circumvent the law. The entertainment industry is vampiric, but not entirely without a soul to the extent that Mr. Maffei is presenting himself to be. I don't know the guy personally. In my exploits and travels at SiriusXM, or anywhere else in the industry, I've never encountered Mr. Maffei. But my impression of him and the only logical takeaway from this story is that he is, among a nest of vampires, the worst of the worst. And I can only say, in the words of the immortal Todd Pettengill,
"You can't be Sirius XM."
That's right. You can't be Sirius XM. I really just needed an excuse to play with my soundboard some more. It's been a while and I've been jonesing. But yeah, Live Nation and Sirius XM, even if they were behaving properly, they should not be overseen by the same guy. And the fact that this guy is a uniquely anti-artist guy is just unacceptable. Variety wrote an op-ed about him on September 14th saying he ought to step down. And I have to say, I am in complete agreement. He should step down, and if he doesn't, which he won't, his attitude is clear. He is standing up in the face of all of his peers, in the face of the obvious right thing to do, and standing up against Paul McCartney and 150 plus other musical legends and saying, no, I'm King Muckety Muck of Shit Mountain. He's not going to step down. The board of directors should vote him out. That's my take anyway. I'm not a big fan of SiriusXM, both because of my personal experiences and because I honestly think in this day and age, Spotify, Apple Music, all these services I've listed before are so much more relevant, sound so much better, are so much easier to use. Realistically, SiriusXM, like radio before it, is doomed to obsolescence. They really only delayed the downfall of radio completely by about 15 years. In 5 years, we're going to be talking about them the way we were talking about FM in 2003, 2004, like, oh yeah, is that still a thing? But in the meantime, he's still causing a lot of harm to a lot of great artists who frankly have been kicked around long enough. It's time for a change. Either Maffei, get your act together, or get out. Or better yet, get the staffers, the programmers, and the board of directors to run him out on a rail. I don't often urge pitchforks on the Matt Sager podcast, but I think this is a Frankenstein-type situation. This guy has caused too much havoc to too many artists who mean too much to us. And to his own frickin' services. Anyway. Hit me up on email, matt@mattsager.com. Call 646-535-4788. Social media, follow me on Twitter, @MattSager, Instagram, Real Matt Sager, Facebook, The Matt Sager, or my voiceover page, Matt Sager VO. Better yet, this podcast page, Matt Sager Podcast. And for more of those social media links, articles, blog posts, more episodes of this podcast, my voiceover links, my contact info, all kinds of stuff, go to mattsagervoiceover.com.